This is Apron Man and his friend, as they can be seen in the Zapruder film, just as JFK is shot in the throat. And here you can see as JFK passes them in the Zapruder film, and as many people have noted, Apron Man, as well as other people, don't seem to be reacting as if the President of the United States is coming by. Apron Man puts his arms down, and it looks as if he's waiting for something else to happen, as if he does not realize that the President has just passed by. But right now, I'm more concerned with Apron Man's friend. You can see him standing beside, or behind, from the Zapruder's perspective, standing behind Apron Man. And you can see he's wearing a hat, and it looks like a bluish sort of color. And this frame, which comes from the Wagman film taken probably less than a minute after the shooting, shows that Apron Man is all alone. His friend is no longer there. And in other films, we can see that Apron Man's friend is not there. In the Couch film, you can't actually see Apron Man in these two frames I have here. But I use the frame on the left on top there because it shows the background of the lawn behind this police officer, and Apron Man's friend is not there. At least he's not anywhere nearby. He could be one of those distant figures to the left of the cop, but he's not to the right of the cop where Apron Man would be. And this is taken about the same time as the Wagman frame just shown. And in the Dillard here, the bottom left, you can see Apron Man there, and he's standing alone, the cop in the foreground. And in the Martin film on the bottom right, this is a little afterwards, you can see Apron Man all by himself is beginning to cross Elm Street. So apparently Apron Man's friend simply disappeared, but not without a trace. There he is, here in the foreground of the Bond 4 photo, the color photo here. And I have the inserts there for you to compare. So Apron Man's friend was not there very shortly after the shooting, but he was across the lawn, much nearer actually to the intersection of Houston and Elm, or I should say Houston and Main. And you see that police officer there running. He's not the same police officer you see in the other films that I've shown. You can tell because he's wearing a different colored hat. He's wearing the dark blue hat, not the white hat. And this police officer almost certainly has to be the one that was standing at the intersection of Main and Houston, because he's the only one in any of these photos around the time of the shooting where he's not wearing the traffic cop's hat. He's wearing the patrolman's hat. So that officer there came from the intersection of Main and Houston, and it could very well be that, it looks like Apron Man's friend could very well have come from the intersection of Main and Houston. At least if we didn't know he was standing on Elm Street, we might think that. In fact, before the president came by, about 10 minutes before, when the ambulance arrived there, Charles Bronson was filming, and this is a frame from his film, and it shows Apron Man and his friend standing at Houston and Main, or just back a little bit from the corner. It also shows Charles Brem there and James Alkins. And this is 10 minutes before the president came by. So 10 minutes before the president came by, Apron Man and his friend both were at the intersection of Main and Houston. And here in the Alkins 6 photo, we can't see Apron Man's friend, but we can see his shadow there. Apron Man is in the black oval, and down on the ground you can see there's two shadows there, and also you can see that Apron Man has his arms in very similar, analogous position as you see him in the Zapruder film at one point. So I think in the Alkins 6 photo here, we're actually seeing Apron Man and his friend, or see that they are there. and also Charles Brem's hands are here. And circled in blue is Billy Lovelady in the doorway. As I have explained in another video, this photograph was faked. That is, Alkins was here earlier to take a photograph in the same position with Billy Lovelady in the doorway, and it also had Apron Man and his friend and Charles Brem over on the right. And then this photo that he took first was combined with another photo he took at the time that the president came by, the point being to prove that Billy Lovelady was in the doorway at the moment the president was shot and not in the 6th floor window performing as a visual decoy. This was accomplished by having Alkins and Zapruder both film earlier, before the president came by. And before the president came by, both the advance car and the pilot car came by. And from Captain Lawrence's Warren Commission testimony, he said, "I knew that Chief Lumpkin was going to. I had been told he was going to be ahead of this motorcade. I got in my car and tried to be a few blocks ahead of him to make sure that everybody was on their assignments." So Captain Lawrence is driving the motorcade route in front of Chief Lumpkin. Captain Lawrence is in the advance car, Lumpkin is in the pilot car. Now, Lumpkin was not interviewed, but Detective Turner was, and he was also in Lumpkin's car. So Bellin asks him, "Were you on duty November 22nd, 1963? "I was. Did you have anything to do with the motorcade?" "I did, yes, sir." "What was your position?" "I was riding in the pilot car of the motorcade, possibly 3 minutes in front of the motorcade." So, we've got two advance cars riding in the motorcade about 3 minutes before the president comes by. And what I'm saying is that Zapruder and Alkins both were filming at the same time that these two advance cars came by, and Apron Man, Charles Brem, and Alkins and Zapruder and Billy Lovelady all arranged to be there at that time so that the photography could be taken that would include them before the president got there, and that afterwards that photography was used with photography taken when the president was there to make it seem as though all of them were there when the president came by, when actually Billy Lovelady was not there when the president came by. That was the point of this. But I don't think that Apron Man's friend was part of this operation. I think Apron Man happened to see his friend here, and they started talking when they were at the intersection of Maine and Houston, and then they both walked over to Elm Street, and they were there when Alkins and Zapruder filmed for their first photographic material. And then Apron Man's friend left. He left and went back probably to Houston and Maine, where we see him near Houston and Maine in the Bond film after the shooting. And Charles Brem is included in this operation because he stays on Houston Street, or he goes with Alkins to Elm Street to take the photo when the two advance cars go by. Then he goes back to Houston Street to take Alkins' photos 1 through 5. And here in the bottom photo from Skaggs, you can see that Charles Brem is standing there with a camera as the president goes by, and he has just taken the Alkins 4 photo. And therefore, because Brem is taking photos for Alkins to have his alibi for him being on Houston Street, that's why Brem has to be in the photo that Alkins takes on Elm Street, so that it can prove that Charles Brem isn't taking photos on Houston Street, if you follow what I'm saying. Anyway, so the reason we see Apron Man alone immediately following the assassination is because he was standing there alone during the assassination. He only seems to be with his friend during the assassination because the Zapruder material where he and his friend are together was taken before the assassination, and it was edited in with the Zapruder film to make it seem as though he was there during the assassination. And that's why his friend shows up near Maine and Houston, not standing on Elm, shortly after the assassination, as we see him in the Bond 4 photo. So, Apron Man, Brem, and Alkins were used to fake the Alkins 6 photo showing Billy Lovelady in the doorway of the Texas School Book Depository. All three were photographed by Bronson about 5 minutes before JFK came by at the intersection of Main and Houston Streets. Then Apron Man, Brem, and Alkins went to their positions on Elm Street, and Apron Man's friend, who was with him at the intersection of Main and Houston, went with Apron Man to Elm Street. 3 minutes before JFK came by, both Zapruder and Alkins were photographing when the advance car and the pilot car came by, providing photographic material for subsequent alterations. The point of the Alkins fakery was to put Billy Lovelady in the doorway, and the point of the Zapruder fakery here was to prove that the Alkins photo was taken while JFK was there, proving that Billy Lovelady was in the doorway when JFK was shot. Apron Man and his friend were photographed by Zapruder at this time. Alkins stayed in position on Elm Street while Brem returned to Houston and Maine to take the first 5 Alkins photos. And Apron Man stayed at his Elm Street position, but his friend returned to Houston and Maine before the president came by, explaining why he is not in the Wagman and Couch films. Did you get all that? So this is a compilation. The foreground, including the limo, and the background were merged together, but they were not photographed at the same time. That's why Apron Man's friend cannot be there when the president comes by, because he was there before when the advance cars came by. All right, that's good.